the most difficult part of coaching now is parents. I think we're fighting a bit of a culture war. This idea of the individual and the concern about my child getting to do exactly what they do, and they lose the focus on teamwork. Parents do what they do because they want a certain result, not because it's the right thing for the team, and not because it's the right buy-in. And there's a pay-to-play mentality, and that happens even at Christian schools. We charge an athletic fee for our children to participate in athletics. Well, some parents take the approach that, well, I paid that athletic fee, so I should be able to tell you exactly what I want to tell you anytime I want to tell you.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Athletics. Yep, I said the word athletics. Even the mention of that word evokes a variety of responses in individuals and in schools, honestly. For some, it's who they are. They bleed sports. For others, it just isn't even on their radar. Athletics in itself is at times divisive, controversial, perhaps imbalanced, but yet there are few other things that rally loyalty, unity, school spirit, and enthusiasm like athletics does. An athletic program is a commitment, yet there are rewards and growth opportunities. But how do you find a balance? How do you ensure that athletics supports the mission of the school and the program, I guess, as a whole, instead of driving it? These are big questions, and the ones that are wrestled with every day in schools. These are just a few of the topics that we're going to touch on in this week's episode of the Teacher Edition podcast. But before we dive in, let me welcome you back. Thank you for choosing to listen in, even on summer break. I hope you also have taken some time to go back and catch up on any episodes that you may have missed, or maybe just revisit and re-listen to some episodes that stuck out to you. I trust you're finding these episodes encouraging and helpful. I know personally, I really enjoy our time with our guests, and I feel like every time when we wrap up, there are some just great takeaways for us. By the way, I hope you're also taking time to find us on social media. Thank you to those of you who have taken time to leave us a rating or review. We really do appreciate that. And when you tell others about the show, we appreciate that as well. Our goal is to be a blessing to as many Christian school educators as possible. And we can't do that if teachers don't know about us. So thank you for your reviews. Thank you also for sharing our information with others as you get that opportunity. I mentioned social media. Be sure to follow us there and don't miss out on any great content. We're Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Teacher Edition Pod. For those of you who haven't found us yet on YouTube, we are there. Go check us out and catch the video version of this podcast. And lastly, I want to invite you to go to our website, teachereditionpodcast.com. There you can subscribe to our emails, and you can also submit your questions and stories. All right, we're talking athletics today, and we are privileged to have Brian Trull with us. He's the administrator of athletics and facilities at Wilson Christian Academy in Wilson, North Carolina. He also serves as the North Carolina Christian School Association State Athletic Commissioner. He earned a degree in history education and has served in a number of different roles over his 25 years in education, including JV and varsity girls basketball coach. And by the way, I understand that they are the varsity girls basketball NCCSA State Champions 8 times over. I think that's really impressive. Brian and his wife have 2 children. So Brian, we have a big topic ahead of us. I'm so glad you're here to share your great experiences with us. So welcome to the podcast.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to it and hope to be a blessing to someone and hope to provide some insight so that teachers and athletic directors will be helped in their walk day to day as they're trying to navigate these issues.
Of course, it would be a bit naive, I guess, to think that we're going to cut through all things athletics in the time we have today. This is a huge topic. So to help us hit the most impacting areas, and by most impacting, I mean, to our audience, we know our Christian school educators, let's hit some of the high points that are really practical, really widely applicable. We know that our listeners are representing small schools, some very large schools, and even as I mentioned in the intro, for some of their schools, school is athletics. That's what their lifeblood is. For others who may be listening, their participation is really minimal. And for others, they're just curious to see where we're going to land in the area of athletics. So let's jump in and talk first about ways that we can use sports, I guess we'll say, as a platform for growth. Of course, we want to see beyond just playing sports for the sake of playing sports. We want our students to be positively impacted by that athletic experience. So Brian, in your experience, what is some of that impact? In what ways can sports be a platform for demonstrating biblical principles? Let's say like perseverance, teamwork, even humility, honestly. What do you think?
Yeah, all those things are very important. And through I have 25 years of experience. I've been to a lot of different places. I graduated from a Christian school of about 200. I wound up going to North Carolina State University, which is obviously a massive university. And then I went and taught. I'm at a Christian school now of about 600. And so you see the role that athletics plays as we kind of move through the school year and move through the academic life of these young people. And I think it's very important. It's important to establish those concepts, those ideas, those foundational principles that you need to have in your athletic department and what role that plays in the school. And I think it's also important to make sure you're fully engaged with your administration, with the families that you work with, that everybody's on the same page, that everybody sees it in the same scope and they look at it the same way, so that you're not butting heads around every corner. And so those three things are very important. They are. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to do that. I feel like we're kind of in a battle in this world today against, it's not necessarily other religions, it's against secular humanism. The idea that we're trying to do what's best for my child. I want what's best for my child. They're going to play in college, or they're going to do this or do that. And we lose focus on those foundational principles. So it's important to have a pathway with your coaches, with your players, and more importantly, with your parents, so that they understand how the athletic department is going to move forward and how they're going to approach these issues.
So we often hear the statement, athletics builds character. We hear maybe cliche, but we say that a lot. Broad, yes, there are many assumptions baked into that. But I think in general, we could agree with it. So let's park there for a minute. Brian, talk to us about the character building part of sports. We know there is one character experience in losing, but honestly, I'd say there's character experience in winning as well, and winning or losing in a God-honoring way. So talk with us about that. How should Christians respond to winning and losing in athletic competitions? What do you think?
Well, absolutely. I think those points are very well stated, that we've got to figure out as leadership in the athletic department of how to teach those skills. And I think oftentimes what students are seeing, maybe not in coaches, but maybe in family members, are how their approach is to winning and losing. And so we have to coach those parents and grandparents as much as we do the young people that are playing, so that they understand what is an acceptable response to both. And we've seen so many in the media, so many wrong displays of how to handle both winning and losing, or just when things don't go your way at all. I listened to some coaches who may not have a biblical worldview, but they say the very same thing. Gino Oriyama, the coach at Connecticut, he says when he goes and looks at players to come to Connecticut to play women's basketball for him, he doesn't watch them play. By the time he gets to see them, he knows they're good enough. He watches how they respond on the bench. Are they pouting? Is their head down? Are they engaged? Do they look at their coach? And those things apply for us too in a biblical worldview standpoint. When we win, how do we respond? Are we respectful of the people that we just competed against? Or when we lose, how do we respond? Do we have negative reactions, and how do we handle those reactions? And look, I'm not naive to think that we're not dealing with teenagers. I understand that. I absolutely understand. We have 25 teams at Wilson Christian, 120 athletes each season. So you're dealing with a lot of people. And so that doesn't mean there's not going to be a negative reaction or a negative response, but it's how do we handle those? How do we prepare them in advance? And then also, how do we handle those when they do respond negatively, and use that as a teaching moment, as an opportunity to show them what a Christian should look like when they win and what a Christian should look like when they lose. And they need to understand too that it's not just the parents that are watching, it's players on the other team, it's officials. There's a whole realm of people that we can influence. And I think it's very valuable influence to those people in the way we respond. For Wilson Christian, we play Christian schools, we play public schools, we play private schools. And so those people that may not be Christians that see the response is very important in how we respond and react to that. And so we try to make sure our coaches are well equipped to deal with that. And if they're not, we kind of put our arm around them and walk them through the process and say, look, this probably was not the best reaction. Let's talk to them about how we should handle that next time. We're not perfect by any stretch of the world, nor do we ever claim to be. But unfortunately, sometimes our one reaction will be the only thing that people remember us by. So we go very deep into trying to make sure that process is taught along the way, that our coaches instill that in the players, and that they're very aware of their responses to both winning and losing.
Yeah. So staying right along those lines, athletics can get really intense. We know that. Both teams are giving everything they have to take the win. And sometimes to get there, you have to navigate some strategies of being tougher, being rougher, outsmarting, outplaying, and just generally speaking, being highly competitive. We talk a lot about biblical worldview on this podcast. So how would that apply here? How do you reconcile the competitive nature of sports with the biblical teachings of loving your neighbor and treating others with kindness? How do those intersect?
So what we do, and I'm just speaking from experience here, how we handle it at Wilson Christian, we try to do it. We've had the opportunity to host state tournaments, and we've hosted other tournaments. So we make an effort both before and after the games. And I'm not discarding what's in the game, but I think the before and after are your opportunities that you really have to meet these people where they are, whether it's officials that are coming to your gym or to your facilities, or whether it's other teams who have never been there before. And so we go out of our way to treat them with respect, with humility. We want them to know that they're welcome. We tell our kids all the time, look, these people that you're playing against are way more like you than they're not like you. And so when we understand that those kids are like us, then it changes the way they treat them in games, whether it comes to helping somebody up after a hard play, or making sure somebody's all right, or shaking hands after the game. I mean, a lot of it comes down to interactions even after the game is over or before the game starts. And that creates relationships that allow those students or those other people to see that yes, we're going to compete, and we're going to look. We say it all the time. We want to go out and beat you as bad as necessary, but when it's over, we love you, and you're our friends. You're our brothers and sisters in Christ. You're like us more than you are not like us, and we want to show that to them. And that helps a ton. I'll tell a quick story. When I first started at Wilson Christian, we had a rival. It was a big rival. They were another Christian school. And I watched over a couple of years, and I felt like that it was not healthy. I wasn't the athletic director at the time. I was just coaching. But I made a point after those first 2 years and seeing that I developed a relationship with their coaches. Every time we played them, I made sure I would go sit with them in the bleachers, talk. And not that the relationship between the coaches or the schools was a rub. The rub was actually with the fans. The fans saw it as like this gladiatorial. It was bad. It was unhealthy. But what happened is they saw that that we were friends, that we interacted with other people, that we kind of moved through things from a biblical worldview, where we were talking about the struggles that we face, the things that we see in the life of these young people, that when people saw that, they were like, oh, okay, it's okay to get along with these people. We wound up having several couples that graduates from us that married graduates of them, and it actually helped down the road. But it was a process that started early on with an unhealthy relationship, and I think a lot of times we see that we've got to fight that battle, that these are not people that we just want to crush and destroy and walk all over and then leave. Yes, we want to compete. We want to compete hard and compete well, but when it's over, that's all it was. A competition. It was not a war. It was not a battle. We had the privilege of Coach Dennis Scott from Bob Jones coming and speaking to our athletic directors in our winter meeting this year, and he talked about true competition and what that meant, and how when we treat it that way, we have much better outcomes than if we look at it as battle and war. And you hear those terms used all the time, but I don't think they're appropriate from a Christian standpoint. I just don't. Is it going to be competition? Absolutely. Is it going to be hard sometimes? Yes. Is it going to be rough and maybe physical? Yes. But does that mean when it's over that they're not humans and we're not humans? Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly we can cross those lines. I grew up at a school, arch rivals all around us, and it was huge, and you'd see those, we kind of get out our fighting faces, so yeah, you can quickly cross those lines. And, going right along with that, we tend to talk students when we discuss behavior in athletics. How should they handle themselves and treat each other? But what about the coaches? So you mentioned that just a teeny bit, just in how you reached out to them. I played sports for a number of years. I grew up in a school. We had a very solid athletics program. We were known to be a highly competitive school. But even with the hundreds of games that I played in or watched, I can't say I really remember a significant number of incredible players, but I do have some really vivid memories of the coaches and their behaviors. There's a lot going on as a coach. You're dealing with players, you have teams and referees, like you said, and of course, then there's the spectators too, some of which are your non-payroll coaches, we know right behind you. There are a lot of eyes on those who are leading, whether or not they like it. How can coaches and mentors, I guess we could say, how could they incorporate biblical principles into their coaching philosophy? We can it's not just the practice of getting out there and knowing your strategies, but in their coaching philosophy as a whole. What do you think?
Well, to go to the beginning, I think first of all you have to make sure your coaches understand biblical worldview, and I'm not unrealistic. Like when we have 25 teams, and we're hiring coaching staff for that, not all of them are teachers at our school. It's just impossible. We just don't. So we actually use a book. I found it at Christian World or Biblical Worldview Conference in California at the Ronald Reagan Center. I was privileged to go to that, and I'll try to say his name right. Dr. Josh Mulvihill writes a book, Christian Biblical Worldview book. I have it here, and we try to get our coaches to read certain parts of that so that we are able to. They start off on the right path so that they understand, and then it's about authority. And I talk about this, we talk about it even on the association level. We had a meeting on Wednesday. We have a summer meeting, and we're the leadership of our association. We're talking about authority, and the authority that is placed over you. And it's hard many times for coaches to understand, because what they see on television, what they see in pop culture is, and I witnessed it myself. We were at a college baseball game, or watching a college baseball game, and the crowd just they were booing the umpires, and the coach was encouraging it. It was actually in South Carolina at Clemson. And so what does that teach? It tells your players that they have that, and so you have to start from the look. We may not always agree with them, but this is the authority that was placed over us. And we are required biblically to submit to that authority. We have that's the authority for the game, and as an athletic director is an authority over the coaches. And so we have to accept that. We don't always agree with that. And I think that's understandable anywhere we are, but that is the authority that God has placed over us. And whether it be non-Christian officials, it does not matter. And so what do our coaches mirror to our athletes is how they respond to that. And that is a constant. That's something I try to sit on the team benches every now and then during the school year for teams that I'm not coaching, and just kind of remind the coach, look, you got your point across. Let's not cross that line. And I think it's important to remind them of that it's not that. And some do better than others. There's some that you remind more than others. I have to remind people that are coaching middle school sports that, look, you're getting middle school officials, and it's not that, but they're still the authority. You have to accept that. And so once our coaches accept that, once our leaders on those teams accept that, then they have now created the moral authority to teach the kids the same thing. And we talk a lot about responses. On my girls' basketball team, I don't want to see you throw your hands out like you didn't like a call. I don't want to see it. And if I do, you're going to come sit with me. You're going to calm down. They'll say, yes, coach, I know. And then we'll put them back in, and they understand why it doesn't look good. It just does. It doesn't look good to the official. It doesn't look good to the other team. It doesn't look good to your teammates, and it doesn't look good to the spectators. And in the end, that's how we're trying to present a biblical worldview to those athletes, but also to everybody that's watching. And that is by not respecting. We want to respect authority, and by not kind of showing your displeasure with that authority as they do things. You really don't see people that are good people get out of the car and throw their hands up when they get stopped for speeding. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, they're usually pretty respectful, and they understand that, and they need to learn that as a life lesson. They really do.
Yeah. And it's hard in the culture we live because, wow, the emotions just hang out, and the responses, like you said, it gets attention and it grows. So yeah, our responses are so important. Okay. So we've talked players and coaches. What about the parents? So parents with children in athletics are invested, or at least for the most part. They're at their games, they have their gear, they're used to eating dinner out of a cooler, they come prepared with their ponchos and their bleacher seats. They are all in, and maybe even more than we are anticipating at times. And sometimes, no matter what we try to bring to the situation, from dealing with a referee call to talking big picture balance of athletics, it's a struggle to bring them into a right and balanced frame of mind. Brian, talk with us about parental involvement in a culture of intense competition and with their most valuable possession, their child, involved in an extremely competitive situation. How do you bring a balance and really cultivate parental support for embracing, for them as well, biblical worldview culture?
Yeah, we talk about it all the time amongst our coaching staffs that the most difficult part of coaching now is parents. It just is, and for many of the reasons that you said, I think we're fighting a bit of a culture war. I think this individualist, this idea of the individual and the concern about my child getting to do exactly what they do, and they lose the focus on teamwork and the things that they're supposed to happen. I read a quote about, instead of using the Bible, we turn to the idea of pragmatism. And that idea of pragmatism is determining actions by the results someone desires. They do what they do. Parents do what they do because they want a certain result, not because it's the right thing for the team, and not because it's the right buy-in. And so, and I think this happens as a result of, I think AAU, travel sports, I think all of these things are influencing that. There's a pay-to-play mentality. And that happens even at Christian schools. We charge an athletic fee for our children to participate in athletics. Well, some parents take the approach that, well, I paid that athletic fee, so I should be able to tell you exactly what I want to tell you anytime I want to tell you. And so you have to get a buy-in in some way, shape, or form from parents, or they have to understand how to approach things differently. We talk about just practical ideas of, don't come to a coach with complaints right after a game. Wait till the next day. The coach will be glad to talk to you, but there's a lot of emotion on all sides that are still going on when that happens. We talk about playing time, and we try to clearly define expectations of playing time for our middle school teams, for our junior varsity teams, and for our varsity teams, and how that will be handled by the coach. And we try to put some responsibility on the players as well. We as coaches would rather talk to a player first, give that player the opportunity. But it seems like, and I don't know if it's post-COVID world, I really don't know, but it seems like parents have become way more invested now. And the idea that they are approaching athletics in a way that it is we're going to have success, we see it happen at our school all the time. If we don't like the direction things are going, instead of trying to resolve the issue and make things better, we're just going to take our child and we'll go somewhere else and see if it's better there. And so I think they lose focus on what the main thing is. And we talked about it at the beginning, where we talked about, where does athletics fit in the scope of the school and the culture? And I think that's important for parents to understand too. I think we have a pretty good athletic program at Wilson Christian, but if you're sending your child to our school just for athletics, then you're there for the wrong reason. You're absolutely there for the wrong reason. And we try to tell them that from the get-go, because if that's the only reason that you're a parent sending their child to our school, then at some point they're going to get upset. There's going to be something they don't like. And if they're not invested in the idea of teaching children from a biblical worldview and preparing them to move on in life as Christian young men and women in whatever role they take down the road, if you don't buy into that concept, then the athletic part is going to be very difficult. The athletic side of it is going to be, because there are things we've talked about them. Emotion gets involved, and these parents who have invested, and you just see it. I mean, we talk about it a lot. Parents who have invested tens of thousands of dollars in travel sports, and I don't know that I think it's more of a issue of where they're trying to build relationships with other people, and it's a status thing. I don't know that it's trying to get college scholarships, because they're spending way more money on the hotels and the rooms and the meals and everything else than they would ever spend on a college education. It's crazy in my mind. It really is.
Yeah, this is great. These are topics that we have to stop and think about, and we have to give intentional focus to. Okay, we have more to cover. I want to talk about maintaining a balance in athletics, of course, but I also want to get your thoughts on travel ball. You mentioned that, and other leagues outside of the ones that we've been talking about, and even talk about some really good ministry opportunities with athletics. Our time for today is gone, but we're going to pick up there next time on the Teacher Edition podcast. Brian will be back with us, and listeners, we'll see you then. Don't miss out. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you were challenged and encouraged as I was. Remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to submit questions for upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now, it's time to get back to your day, but it's not just any day, because every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.